Caleb Rourke didn't stop digging. When the dust started to bleed through the sky, he could hear the wind picking up along the ridge, howling low and mean like a stray dog. But his shovel kept biting the dry earth, the same rhythm, same weight. The grave was half done, and the man it was meant for was still cooling in the back of the undertaker's cart, face covered with a feed sack, boots missing. "Rourke!" a voice shouted from the ridge. Caleb didn't look up. "I'm busy. You got company?" He wiped his brow, turned toward the voice. Josiah, the boy from the post, sat atop a dun mare, pointing downhill. Caleb followed the gesture. At first, he didn't see anything. Then, a figure walking, staggering, really long dress clinging to bare legs, one hand pressed to her side, the other waving slightly, like trying to balance on something that wasn't there. Josiah clicked his tongue. "She's been coming since noon. Refused a ride. Said she was looking for the Gravedigger." Caleb dropped the shovel. The woman was closer now, her face pinched under the rim of a sun-damaged bonnet, lips cracked and bleeding. Her hair was soaked at the edges, stuck to her throat. When she reached him, she didn't speak, just held something out, a wedding veil, crumpled, smudged red. He didn't touch it. "You lost." She shook her head. He looked past her. No horse, no wagon, just her and the wind. "Follow me." He led her to the shed behind his lean-to. There was one chair, a wash basin, and a cot that hadn't been used since. She didn't sit, she just stood in the doorway, swaying. "Name?" he asked. "Loretta." He waited. Nothing more came. He poured water into a tin cup, handed it to her. She drank like she hadn't in days, eyes closed. When she was done, she finally looked up. Her cheek was bruised, right above the jawline. Old, but not too old, and the rip in her dress had been sewn with saddle thread, fast and rough. "I don't care who you ran from," he said. "I didn't ask you to." "Then why are you here?" Her voice cracked. "You bury the dead. Thought maybe you'd help the half-dead, too." That made him pause. She wasn't begging, just stating a fact. He gestured to the cot. "Rest. You need it." She sat, stared at the floor outside. The wind kicked harder. Caleb stepped out to grab his shovel, and stopped. There were fresh tracks behind the shed. Hoofprints, 3 horses, headed north. He followed them for 20 yards. One boot print stood out heavy, deep, not from Loretta. He came back inside. "You were followed." She didn't react, just said, "They won't find me before dark." "They?" She looked up. "One of 'em wears a badge." That changed things. Caleb closed the shed door and bolted it. He crossed to the back of the lean-to and lifted a loose board. Behind it, an old rifle rested on 2 nails. He caught her watching. "Expecting to need that?" she asked. He didn't answer. He didn't want her here. Didn't want the questions. Didn't want the law sniffing around his property. Not after everything. But turning her out would mean sending her to die. And the land might have hardened him. But it hadn't turned him mean. Not yet. He brought her a blanket. "Night gets cold. You'll stay here." "I won't be here long." He nodded once and left. At sundown, he finished the grave. The undertaker didn't come. The body was still in the cart. Caleb lit a lamp, sat on the stoop, and waited. An hour passed. Then, hoofbeats. Not down the road, across the scrub, quiet, measured. He stood, rifle in hand. A man emerged from the brush, hat pulled low, coat dusty, no badge. But the way he sat his horse said enough. "You Rourke?" The man asked. "I am." "You seen a woman? Dark hair, about yet tall, dressed for a wedding." Caleb kept the rifle down. "Why would I? She was headed this way. I bury folks. That's all I do." The man scanned the area. His horse shifted, restless. "Mind if I look around?" "I do." The man smiled without warmth. "That's not smart." Caleb stepped forward. "You're not here legal. Not without the sheriff. You got a warrant." The man's smile twitched. He turned the horse. "She shows up, you let me know. I'll consider it." When the rider disappeared over the ridge, Caleb went back to the shed. Loretta hadn't moved. "He came," he said. "She didn't ask who. He'll be back." She nodded. He sat in the corner, rifle across his lap. The only sound was the wind banging against the siding and her breathing, shallow and sharp. Around midnight, she spoke. "Why do you live out here?" He didn't look at her. "Someone's got to dig. You always been alone." "No." Silence again, then softly. "What happened to her?" He stood. "Go to sleep." Before dawn, Caleb heard something. He stepped out. Dust rose low over the horizon. 3 riders, same as before, but faster now. He turned to the shed. "Get up," he said. She blinked. "We gotta move. We're—" He didn't answer. He opened the hatch under the shed floor. It wasn't meant for guests. It wasn't even meant for hiding. But it would do. She crawled in without a word. He shut the hatch just as the first hoof hit the yard. One of the riders shouted, "You diggin' this early, Rourke?" He looked down at his shovel, still in the grave. He picked it up. "No." He called back, "Just finishing what I started." "Then you won't mind if we watch." Caleb let the shovel bite the earth again, deeper now, slower. The light was climbing up from the edge of the world, a dull copper stretching thin across the sky. The grave should have been finished yesterday, but between the woman and the riders, he'd lost the time. Now, he had to finish it before more questions came. Loretta hadn't made a sound since he pulled her out of the crawl space. She'd slept most of the morning inside the shed. Blanket pulled tight, the bruises on her legs darkening like wet ash. She didn't ask what was next, neither did he. The grave was nearly done when he heard the latch on the shed creak open. She walked over slowly, barefoot, holding the crumpled wedding veil from the day before. She didn't look at him, just stood beside the grave and stared down. "You bury him yet?" she asked. Caleb paused. "Not yet." "Who is he?" "Name's Everett Colley, Mule Skinner. Found dead on the South Road 3 nights ago. Looks like he died hard." Caleb didn't answer. Loretta moved around the open hole and stepped up onto the cart. She knelt beside the wrapped figure, pulled the sheet down just enough to see the jaw. She froze, her fingers trembled, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. "I know him." Caleb's grip tightened on the shovel. "How?" "He worked for the sheriff. Not officially. But if you owed something, or ran your mouth, he was the kind of man they sent." "Friend of yours?" "No." She dropped the cloth and stepped back. "He's the one who brought the dress. Said I'd wear it whether I wanted to or not." She looked at Caleb, jaw clenched. "You didn't say he was found near the pass." "I didn't think it mattered." "Well, it does." She walked back to the edge of the grave, stared in. "How'd he die?" Caleb set the shovel down, broken neck. "Looked like he fell." "From what?" He didn't answer. She turned toward him. "You didn't find a horse, did you?" "No." She squinted, shielding her eyes against the morning light. "So he was on foot, walking. That's not like him." She knelt and touched the dirt beside the grave. It was still cool, the way it gets before sunrise. She picked up a clump and let it fall through her fingers. He wasn't out there by accident. Caleb didn't say anything. He watched her closely now. The way she moved wasn't tired anymore. It was measured, controlled. "You got any tools I can use?" she asked, straightening. "For what?" "Fixing the lock on your shed. Anyone could kick that in." He handed her a small toolbox. She turned without another word and walked back. Something about her silence unsettled him more than her questions. Around noon, Josiah came back, this time on foot, sweat soaking through his shirt. "There's talk in town," the boy said, out of breath. "Sheriff says you're hiding someone." Caleb didn't look up from the grave. Josiah shifted his weight. "You are, aren't you?" Caleb kept digging. The boy hesitated. "They're saying Everett might have been pushed." Now Caleb looked up. "Pushed?" "Yeah. Off the canyon trail. Sheriff said the horses came back without him. Someone saw a scuffle. Maybe a woman." Josiah paused, then added, "Said her dress was white." Caleb leaned on the shovel. "Then they're chasing a ghost. Sheriff says it's attempted murder. He's got a notice coming." Caleb nodded. "You done?" Josiah stepped back. "You should be careful." "I am." The boy left. Loretta appeared again as the dust settled. "He's sending a warrant," she said. "You believe that?" "I believe men like him don't like being embarrassed." "He's more than embarrassed. He's scared. Everett wasn't out there on patrol. He was looking for something." "You?" "No," she said, stepping forward. "He was digging. Secrets." She took something from her pocket. A slip of folded paper, creased and damp at the edges. "He dropped this the last time he grabbed me." Caleb opened it. A half-written list, names, dates. One was circled. "A J. Finn. You know this name?" she asked. He nodded once. "Josephine Finn." town doctor. Retired. She's not retired. Loretta said flatly. She's gone. Disappeared 6 days ago. Caleb folded the paper. People leave. Not without packing. Not without saying goodbye. She was the only one who helped me. She knew what he was planning. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What was he planning? She looked down. To make me disappear, too. He waited. She didn't elaborate. Instead, she turned and looked at the body again. You said he broke his neck. I did. Did you see it happen? No. Then don't speak like you know. She walked away. By late afternoon, the grave was ready. Caleb hauled the wrapped corpse to the edge, lowered it with practiced hands. Loretta stood nearby, arms crossed, watching every motion. He picked up the shovel, but didn't move. She finally asked, "Why aren't you burying him?" Caleb looked down. Something's wrong. With what? This. He pointed to the man's boots. Still missing. He wouldn't go without them. Not out here. Maybe someone took them. Then where are the tracks? They both looked around, nothing but wind and dirt. Caleb dropped the shovel and knelt beside the corpse. He unwrapped more of the cloth, revealing the collarbone, arms, stomach. There, a bruise faint, but shaped like a boot heel. Loretta inhaled sharply. He was stomped. Or kicked. No. That's a heel mark. That's rage. They looked at each other. You think I did it? She asked. I don't know what to think. She stepped close. If I wanted him dead, I wouldn't leave a mark. That made him pause. Loretta knelt, brushing dirt from the man's cuff. Then she froze. What is it? She reached in and pulled something from inside the jacket. A small envelope, unsealed, smudged with dried blood. She opened it. Inside a drawing crude, a map. She turned it to Caleb. It was his property, the back pasture. The old dry well. Caleb stared. Why would he have this? Loretta's voice went low. Because someone told him to dig. She folded the map and tucked it into her sleeve. You're not going to show the sheriff? She met his eyes. He already knows. Caleb took a step back. What aren't you telling me? She turned away. There's more under this land than bones. They buried Everett in silence. When the last of the dirt was packed, Caleb carved the name into a flat stone and wedged it at the head. No one would visit. No one would bring flowers, but it was done back at the shed. Loretta boiled water over the small stove. I'm staying one more night, she said. I didn't ask. She nodded. You're not like him. Caleb didn't respond. You dig holes, she said, stirring slowly. But you don't bury people just to forget em. He looked at her then. She poured him coffee. Outside, the sun sank behind Black Mesa. Inside, the air thickened with heat and silence. Then Loretta spoke again, so soft it nearly vanished. If she's dead, then I have nothing left to trade. The chickens were gone. Caleb stood by the coop at sunrise, jaw tight, boots sunk into the dry patch of earth, just east of the lean-to. Feathers littered the ground like a busted pillow. No tracks, no blood, no mess, just absence. Like something had reached in and removed them one by one without a sound. Loretta stepped out of the shed behind him, pulling the shawl tight around her shoulders. She'd slept light, or not at all. Coyotes? She asked. Too clean. He crouched, sifted through the scattered feathers, found one that had been sheared smooth near the quill. Knife, maybe. Or gloved hand. She watched him a long beat, then someone was close. He stood, close enough to know we didn't hear a damn thing. He didn't say it, but they both knew what it meant. Everett Colley hadn't been alone. Someone had followed him. Either before or after his neck broke. Back inside, Loretta pulled a canvas bundle from under the cot. Caleb recognized it as hers. Stitched by hand, awkwardly, like someone not used to needlework. She unwrapped it and laid out the contents on the small table. 2 books. A brass hairbrush, one cracked photograph of a woman in uniform, eyes sharp, mouth firm, and at the bottom, wrapped in flannel, a telegram. She passed it to Caleb. It's dated 6 days ago. He read silently. Dr. Joe Falkasnov scope no stop lea vinegro mu antio uedistop ruck ustag assistempia. The signature at the bottom was a marshal's mark. Real official. You said she helped you, Caleb said, folding it back. She was more than help. She delivered me once. You were sick. No, I mean she delivered me. At birth. Caleb blinked. My mother died after. She held me for the first hour, Joe's been in my life ever since. She. Loretta's voice cracked. She stopped, started again. She was the one who got me out. Out of that house, out of that man's reach. She hid me in her clinic for 2 days after I ran. I left before she could be blamed. Caleb leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. Why didn't you tell me that? Because I didn't think she'd vanish. I thought she'd be angry. I thought. She broke off. You thought she was safe? Caleb said. Loretta nodded once. He rubbed a calloused thumb across the telegram. How far is her place? 6 miles south. Near the bluff. Small white cabin with a blue shingle roof. You think they took her? I think they wanted her quiet. She picked up the photo from the table and handed it to him. That's her. Caleb studied the picture. Joe Finn looked like the kind of woman who wouldn't move aside, even if you came at her on horseback. That kind of will didn't just disappear. She ever say anything about the sheriff? He asked. She said men like him don't need power. They just need silence. Caleb looked up. And if she's gone, then I'm next. They both knew it. He set the picture down and went to the shelf by the stove, pulled down a saddlebag he hadn't touched in months. Inside was a canteen, a box of cartridges and a half-rolled map. Loretta watched him silently. You're going? She asked. He nodded. I'll ride out. Take a look around. I'm coming. No. You can't leave me here alone. Caleb considered that. She was right in part. But bringing her into town would be worse. He went to the back room, pulled a board loose under the window sill. Out came an old revolver wrapped in oilcloth. He held it out to her. If someone comes, you shoot. She took it, held it like she knew the weight. You trust me with this? No. He grabbed his hat, opened the door. She followed him out. Caleb. She called, just as he reached the horse. He turned. Her voice was steady, but low. If Joe's dead, then I have nothing left to trade. He didn't reply, just nodded once and rode off into the wind. The clinic sat at the edge of a dying orchard, trees twisted from drought, branches low and brittle. The roof was still blue, though most of the paint had peeled. One shutter hung crooked on the left window. The front door was open. Caleb approached slow, rifle across the saddle horn, no smoke from the chimney, no horses, no sounds. He dismounted, tied the reins to a dry post. The porch creaked underfoot. He pushed the door open. Inside, the air was stale and still. A chair overturned, a cup broken near the hearth, paper scattered across the floor, but no blood, no body. He moved carefully, stepping over a fallen ledger. A half-packed satchel sat on the bed. Open, clothes inside, unfinished. On the wall next to the window hung a row of photographs. Patients, townsfolk, children. One photo was missing. The glass cracked where it had been pried loose. He crossed to the desk, drawers half open, the bottom one locked. He knelt, pulled a pick from his boot, and worked the mechanism gently. Click, inside papers, a folded shawl, and something wrapped in a towel. He unwrapped it, a bloodied bandage, fresh, days old, maybe less. Someone had been here, hurt. He tucked it back inside and scanned the room again. On the floor near the stove, something caught the light, a brooch, silver, shaped like a bird in flight. He picked it up. Loretta had worn this yesterday. He pocketed it, stood, heart kicking faster. If Loretta had been here after she said she left. He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he stepped outside and nearly ran into a shadow coming around the side. The man was tall, lean, with a tattered coat and eyes too sharp for a drifter. A rifle rested loose in his arms, but not pointed. Easy. The man said. Caleb didn't move. The man smiled, almost friendly. Didn't expect company up here. You a friend of the doctor? Caleb stayed silent. The man looked him over. You're Rourke, the gravedigger. Still silent, word travels. The man said, especially when someone starts burying folks without asking. What do you want? Caleb asked. Same as you, I expect. Answers. Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. The man grinned wider. Don't worry. I ain't the law. He held out a piece of paper, folded, touched with red thumbprint ink. A bounty notice, Loretta's name printed bold across the top. Runaway bride. The man said, with a tendency to start fires. Caleb didn't take the paper. The man tucked it back into his coat. Name's Silas Bell, he said. Used to know your brother. I don't have a brother. Silas shrugged. Everyone has someone they buried. He tipped his hat. I'll be seeing you, Rourke." Then he walked off toward the trail, not looking back. When Caleb returned, Loretta was waiting on the porch, coat pulled tight, gun still tucked in her belt. She stood when she saw him. "You found her?" "No. She sagged again's looking for you," he added. "I figured." "Silas Bell." "Ring a bell." Her face stiffened. "He used to work for my father, before the sheriff." Caleb nodded. "He has a bounty notice. Then it's official." She didn't ask about Joe again. Instead, she pulled the revolver from her belt. Handed it back. "You'll need it," she said. Caleb looked at her. Really looked. Something had shifted, maybe in her, maybe in him. Then he said the only thing that came to mind. "She's the one who delivered you. I won't be the one who buries her." The trapdoor was open. Caleb saw it the moment he stepped behind the shed. It hadn't been forced. Just lifted clean and left ajar like someone expected to return. The crawlspace beneath was dark, the dirt inside undisturbed. He crouched, ran a hand along the edge of the frame. No scuff marks, no damage. But someone had been down there. Loretta appeared beside him. "You keep anything under there?" "No, just boards and dust." She bent beside him, eyes narrowed. "Then why come back?" They both knew the answer. Someone had been looking for her. Caleb shut the trapdoor and threw the bolt. The wind shifted hard from the south, carrying grit through the yard and rattling the loose tin on the coop roof. He stood, scanned the horizon. Nothing but dust and mesaline. "Grab your boots," he said. "We're checking the barn." Loretta didn't ask why, she just followed. The barn sat low and wide, built half into the earth. A leftover from when this land belonged to someone with more ambition. Caleb hadn't used it in months. No stock, no need. But the doors were unlocked when they reached it. Inside, the dust had been disturbed. Caleb led the way with a lantern. Loretta held her coat tight, one hand inside the pocket where the map remained folded. The main room was empty. Tools on the wall untouched. But at the far end, beside the stack of old feed sacks, a square of dirt looked fresher than the rest, flattened by a heel. Caleb crouched. Too recent. Loretta looked up at the rafters. Someone was watching us. He stood, scanned the loft. Nothing moved. Then something scraped against the wall outside. Both froze. Caleb blew the lantern out. A shadow passed by the crack in the barn siding. Long coat, slow gait. A familiar voice followed. "Still sleeping with the dead, Rourke." "Silas Bell." Caleb motioned Loretta back behind the feed. He stepped toward the door, quiet as he could, and opened it just enough to see. Silas stood alone, rifle slung across his shoulder, chewing something and spitting dark juice into the dirt. "You've been awful busy lately," he said into the wind. "Graves don't dig themselves." Caleb stepped out. Silas smiled. "There he is. You lost something, maybe? Or maybe I'm just curious." "About?" Silas glanced up at the barn. "About how a girl who ain't supposed to exist ends up hiding behind a man who's supposed to be dead inside." Caleb didn't flinch. "You came all this way for riddles." No. I came for business." Silas pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Sheriff's offering a bonus if she's brought in before the end of the week." "She's not here." Silas nodded, not believing. "You're not lying very well." Caleb stepped closer. "You're not on a badge anymore, Silas. You come on this land again, you'll leave in a box." Silas's grin didn't waver. "Might be. But not before I find what I came for." He turned and walked off, slow and easy, like he didn't care how close the threat sat behind Caleb's teeth. Only once he disappeared behind the ridge did Caleb exhale. Loretta emerged from the shadows. "He's going to dig up everything. Let him try." She held up her hand. Something small and metal gleamed between her fingers. A matchstick. The head had been half struck. Charred but not burned. "He was behind the barn," she said, watching. Caleb took it, rolled it between his fingers. "You think he knows about the map?" "I think someone gave it to him." She looked back at the barn. "I want to see where it leads." "Now's not the time." "We wait, he burns it all down." Caleb considered her, then nodded once. They returned to the lean-to and unrolled the map on the table. The sketch was crude but clear. Fence line, dry creek. An X marked behind the old well. "I haven't touched that well in years," he said. "It's bone dry. Doesn't mean it's empty." They packed light. Just a lantern, the revolver, and a pry bar. The sun had started to dip when they reached the well. Wind whipped through the tall grass, bending it in waves. The cover was intact. Caleb heaved it aside. A faint smell rose. Dry rot and something else older. Loretta lit the lantern and leaned over the edge. Wood lining's still there, she said, but warped. Caleb lowered himself down first. The shaft was narrow, the ladder old but holding. At the bottom, a shallow basin of gravel, no water. He moved the light in slow arcs, then stopped half buried in the corner a crate. Military-style iron clasps. He knelt, wiped away the dust. The crate was marked in stenciled paint, USARMYPRY. Loretta's voice echoed down. What is it? Caleb didn't answer. He popped the clasp inside. Bundles of documents wrapped in oilcloth, some tied with cord. One envelope on top bore the initials JF. He stared at it. Caleb, she called. He looked up. Don't come down. Why not? There's blood. Back at the lean-to, Caleb laid the documents out on the table. Loretta sat across from him, eyes wide but focused. He unwrapped the top bundle. Medical records, stamped with Army seals, all tied to an old base 10 miles south, long since abandoned. What does Joe have to do with this? She asked. Caleb opened the envelope. Inside were handwritten letters, dozens each signed E. Josephine Finn RN. He scanned one. Patient Fate 237, gunshot wound, no military ID, refused to speak. Sheriff Barnes retrieved him without medical release. Jesus, he muttered. Another letter. Warning issued, local enforcement exceeding jurisdiction. Civilian injuries unreported. One fatality under suspicious transfer. Loretta leaned forward. She was reporting him. Officially. Caleb looked up. She was the last barrier between him and the dark. They sat in silence, then a voice outside broke it. I wouldn't touch that if I were you. Caleb stood fast. Hand to the rifle. Silas stood outside the open door. One boot on the threshold, rifle resting casual in his arm. Loretta stepped beside Caleb. Silas grinned. What a pair. Caleb said. I was a lot of places. You working for him? Loretta asked. Sheriff don't pay me. He threatens. There's a difference. Caleb raised the rifle a hair, then walk away. Silas shook his head. Can't. That crate. It's bigger than both of you. That's not just leverage, it's insurance. Everyone who's seen it ends up buried. He stepped 1 foot inside. Loretta didn't move. You come for the papers? She asked. I came to make a deal. No deals. Caleb said, but Loretta raised a hand. Let him speak. Silas looked her over. You're smarter than he is. Say what you came to say. You give me those records, I walk. You keep him, I burn it all. You the cabin, the girl, the land. Gone. Caleb chambered around. You're not walking out with anything. Silas stepped back, slow. Then I guess we know where we stand. He turned. But remember this. He called over his shoulder. You're not the only one who knows how to dig. Then he was gone into the dusk. Inside, Caleb sealed the crate shut. Loretta watched him with folded arms. What now? We hide it. He'll come back. I know. She crossed to the stove and stirred the coals. You said this place wouldn't burn. Caleb looked at her. It won't, he said. But even he didn't believe it. Outside, the wind began to rise again, dry and full of static. Inside, Loretta whispered the one thing neither of them wanted to face. He's not here for me anymore. He's here for what I found. It started with the wind again, but this time, it carried something new, smoke. Caleb stepped out onto the porch and lifted his head to the sky. It was faint. Just a smear in the blue. But it wasn't from their chimney, too far east, and it wasn't drifting. It was rising, fast, straight up. Loretta joined him, one hand pressed flat to her chest. That's not natural. No. He scanned the ridgeline. Too dry for a cooking fire, she said. Too late in the season for a burn pile. It's not a mistake. Caleb muttered. He turned and went inside, grabbing the crate they'd pulled from the well. It was still sealed tight. The weight hadn't changed. Loretta hovered near the table, eyes locked on the smoke. Do you think it's Joe? He paused mid-step. Say it, she said. Say you're wondering too. He didn't. Instead, he bent down and pried up the floorboards beneath the cot. There was just enough room to wedge the crate in sideways. He replaced the boards and nailed them down. Grab your coat, he said. "We're checking the pasture." They saddled the horses and rode out, dust kicking underfoot, sun flat and mean overhead. The wind carried the smell stronger now. Burnt canvas, dried hair, something sour underneath. It wasn't long before they found it, behind the third fence-post, where the land dipped toward the dried-out arroyo. A patch of black earth spread wide, still smoking. At the center stood a wooden cross, new wood, fresh nails. Caleb dismounted. Rifle in hand, Loretta stayed in the saddle, scanning the horizon, no sign of hoofprints. "No need," Caleb said. "They came on foot." He crouched beside the cross, no name carved, no marker, just a strip of blue cloth nailed to the front. Loretta sucked in a breath. "That's from Joe's shawl." He looked up at her. "You sure?" She wore it every day, said it kept the desert out of her lungs. Caleb stood, checked the edges of the burn, no bones, no ash pile. But something had definitely been torched here. He knelt again and sifted through the char. His fingers found something hard beneath the topsoil. A small brass pin, shaped like a caduceus, the medical emblem. He held it up, burnt, bent, but still recognizable. "She's not here," Loretta said, voice low. "No," he said, "but she was." She slid off her horse and came beside him. The wind caught her coat, flared it out like a banner. He handed her the pin. She took it gently, like it might fall apart in her hands. "They wanted us to see this," she whispered. He nodded. "This wasn't just about her," she said. "They're marking ground, like animals. They're warning us." Loretta looked around, eyes narrowing. "Then I say we leave them something in return." He raised a brow. "We dig." Caleb stared at her. "You want to dig a grave for a woman we don't know is dead?" "No," she said. "I want to dig for the truth." She turned toward the far end of the pasture. "There's another old plot out there, isn't there?" she asked. "Your mother's?" He stiffened. "I saw the marker," she added, "behind the fence line." He didn't respond. "Why's it unkept?" she asked softly. "Why no flowers, no stone?" She didn't want one. Loretta met his eyes, or she didn't get the choice. The words hung heavy in the dry air. Caleb looked away. "She's the reason you stayed out here, isn't she?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to his horse and mounted up. "Come on," he said. "We'll dig." The sun was sinking by the time they reached the old gravesite. It wasn't much. Just a patch of earth surrounded by a rusted fence and a single wooden stake leaning at a slant. No name, no date. Just a piece of twine wrapped 3 times around the top. Caleb dismounted first. Loretta followed, pulling the shovel from her saddlebag. He took it from her without a word and began to dig. The ground was hard, packed with seasons of dust and wind. Every strike echoed in the silence. Loretta watched him work until the sweat darkened his shirt. She finally spoke. "You buried her yourself?" He nodded. "Anyone come?" "No one left to." Loretta stepped closer. "What was strong?" he said, quiet. She waited. "She tried to leave once," he said after a moment, packed a bag, said she was heading east. "I told her she wouldn't make it through the flats alone. She left anyway." Loretta frowned, but she didn't get far. Caleb nodded. "They found her 2 days later. Heatstroke, face down in the sand." He stopped digging. Loretta crouched beside him. "That's not the whole story." "No," he said. "It's not." He went back to the dirt. After 5 more strikes, his shovel hit something solid. He dropped to his knees and brushed the earth away with his hands. A box, not a coffin, smaller, squared edges. He pried it open. Inside, a stack of letters, tied in twine, a locket, a folded dress, yellowed with time, and on top, another map. Loretta picked it up. Same hand as the other. Caleb stared down at the dress. "My mother didn't die out there," he said. Loretta turned to him, heart beating fast. He picked up the locket, turned it in his hand. "She died here. And I buried her quiet because nobody else would care." "Why lie about the place?" "Because she tried to leave a man like the one you ran from." Loretta looked down at the map again. "It leads back to town," she said. "Look, these buildings, this alley, this is Santa Loma." She traced a line from the edge of the paper to a point marked with a square. "J. Fenn." She read. "It's the clinic. Someone's been watching her longer than we thought." Caleb stood. "They buried this out here so nobody'd ask questions. And now we've got more than one body to answer for." She folded the map and tucked it into her coat. Then, softly, your mother tried to leave, just like me. Caleb nodded. She died alone. Another nod. She won't be the last if we keep waiting. He met her eyes. We won't wait. They covered the box again, slow and careful. As they mounted to ride back, the wind shifted, a low crack echoed from the distance, like a rifle pop. But too muffled to be sure, Caleb turned in the saddle. Was that? Loretta was already pulling the revolver from her coat. No birds flew up. She said, "That means it wasn't far." Caleb urged his horse into a trot. They crossed the pasture just as the first black wisp curled over the ridge near the barn. Flames flickered into view. Orange lashing against the sky, Caleb's stomach dropped. "The hay," he said, "it's dry as bone." They rode hard, hooves pounding the hardpan. The barn was half engulfed when they reached it. Caleb jumped down and ran for the pump, filling buckets fast as he could. Loretta tore off her coat, beat at the flames crawling toward the fencing. A beam collapsed inside, sending sparks skyward. Too far gone. They stepped back together, breath ragged. The barn screamed as the roof caved in. Smoke rolled low across the yard. Thick and mean, Loretta coughed, eyes watering. "He waited for us to leave," she said. Caleb didn't respond, just stared into the fire. Then she whispered the thing he'd feared since morning. He was behind the barn again. This time, he left us something worse than a match. The carriage came at midday. Caleb heard it before he saw it. The rattle of iron-rimmed wheels, the labored snort of horses pushed too hard in the heat. He was standing in the yard, watching smoke still lift in thin threads from the barn's bones. When the sound cut through everything else, Loretta froze beside him. They didn't need to speak. The road crested the low rise and the wagon appeared, black and official, pulled by 4 matched bays. The sun flashed off a brass badge fixed to the door. Sheriff Barnes had come himself. Caleb's mind moved fast, faster than his body ever did. If they ran now, they'd be seen. If they fought, they'd be dead before nightfall. The land offered no cover, no mercy. Loretta's fingers brushed his sleeve. "Let me go," she said quietly. He turned on her. "No. It's the only way," she said. "You heard Silas. They won't stop." Caleb scanned the horizon. No riders, no neighbors, just dust and heat. "If they take me," she continued, "you can still bury what matters." "And what about you?" She looked at him then, steady and clear. "I'll survive. I always do." The wagon rolled into the yard and stopped. Sheriff Barnes stepped down first. Tall, broad, uniform pressed despite the heat. His eyes flicked to the charred remains of the barn, then to Caleb, measuring. Behind him climbed Silas Bell, slower, easier, a man enjoying the shade of someone else's authority. "Well," the sheriff said, voice smooth, "looks like we caught you at a bad time." Caleb didn't answer. Barnes tipped his hat toward Loretta. "Miss Kane, you've caused a great deal of trouble." Loretta didn't lower her eyes. "Only for men who deserve it." Barnes smiled thinly. "That's so." Silas stepped forward. "We came to take her in, Rourke. Peaceful like." Caleb's hand tightened around the rifle, but he didn't raise it. Barnes noticed. "I'd advise against that." Caleb exhaled slowly. Loretta took 1 step forward. "I'll go," she said. "But you leave him out of it." Barnes raised a brow. "Generous. She's not a criminal," Caleb said. "You terminated the arrangement. You signed it." Barnes shrugged. "Paper's one thing. Order's another." Silas leaned close to Caleb, voice low. "You hand her over now. I might forget what I saw in that well." Caleb's jaw clenched. Loretta looked between them. She understood. Too well. "I'll walk," she said again. Caleb grabbed her wrist. She shook her head once, just once. "Trust me." It was the hardest thing he'd done since he put his mother in the ground. He let go. Barnes gestured toward the wagon. "Get in." Loretta climbed up without help. Silas followed, settling inside across from her. The door slammed shut. Barnes mounted his horse. The wagon turned. Caleb stood alone in the yard, dust curling around his boots, the sound of the wheels pulling something out of him as it went. He didn't move until they disappeared over the rise. Inside the wagon, the air was thick and close. Loretta sat straight, hands folded in her lap. Silas lounged opposite her, hat tipped back, watching her like she was something he'd already bought. "You handled that well," he said. "Most women cry." She didn't answer. "You know," he went on, If you'd just married him, none of this would have happened. She looked at him then. Men like you always think that. Silas chuckled. Men like me survive. The wagon jolted over a rut. Loretta braced herself, eyes flicking to the door. The latch, the small window barred with iron. Silas leaned forward, elbows on knees. You ever wonder why Rourke lives the way he does? He asked. She said nothing. He wasn't always a gravedigger. Silas continued. Used to run cattle. Had a wife. Loretta's chest tightened despite herself. Pretty thing, Silas said, quiet. Folks said she took her own life. Rope in the shed. Tragic. Loretta met his gaze. You don't believe that. Silas smiled, slow and sharp. His wife didn't kill herself, he said. I saw the rope marks on her neck. Loretta's breath caught. She was strangled. Silas went on, voice almost conversational. Different pressure. Different angle. Not what you get from a woman stepping off a stool. Loretta swallowed hard. You telling me this why? Because you should know who you're trusting, Silas said. Men who bury lies don't stop at dirt. The wagon slowed. Loretta stared at the floor, heart pounding, mind racing. If it was true, if Caleb had. No, not now, not without proof. The wagon stopped, the door opened. Barnes's voice cut in. Out. Loretta stepped down into the glare. They weren't in town. They were at the old way station by the flats. Abandoned, half collapsed. Far from eyes and ears, her pulse spiked. This isn't the jail, she said. Barnes smiled. Paperwork takes time. Silas climbed down last. Barnes turned to him. Take her inside. I'll be along shortly. Silas gestured with his chin. Loretta hesitated. Then walked. Inside the station, the air was cooler, shadows pooling in the corners. Old chains hung from the wall, a table, 2 chairs. Silas closed the door behind them. You hear that? He said. She listened. Nothing. No wagon. No voices. They'll be gone a while. Silas said. Sheriff doesn't like mess. Loretta took a step back. You said you were taking me in. I said a lot of things. He moved closer. She drew the revolver from her coat. Silas stopped. Careful, he said. You shoot me, they'll hunt you to the end of the territory. Step back. He raised his hands, smiling easy. She kept the gun steady. You wanted leverage, she said. I'm it. Silas's eyes narrowed. You think Rourke will trade those papers for you? I think he won't let me die. Silas laughed. You don't know him as well as you think. She didn't answer. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose boards. Silas's gaze flicked to the door. Time's running, he muttered. He lunged. Loretta fired. The shot tore into the wall beside his head, showering splinters. Silas cursed and dove, crashing into the table. She fired again, missed. But it bought her space. She ran, out the door, across the yard, heart in her throat. The wagon was gone. Silas shouted behind her. She ran toward the flats, the open land offering nothing but distance. A shot cracked. Dust kicked up near her feet. She kept running. Another shot. Pain flared in her side. White hot. She stumbled, caught herself, kept going until the world tilted. She collapsed behind a low stone wall. Breath ragged, blood soaking through her dress. Silas approached slow, gun raised. You should have stayed put, he said. Before he could fire, a rifle cracked from the ridge. Silas spun, dropped. Caleb came over the rise at a dead run, rifle smoking. Loretta sagged against the stone, vision blurring. Caleb reached her, dropped to his knees. Stay with me, he said, hands pressing hard against the wound. She looked up at him, face pale, he said. She gasped. He said your wife didn't. I know, Caleb said. I know. Her eyes searched his. We'll talk, he said. Later. She nodded once, then her grip on his sleeve tightened. Behind them, the wind carried the echo of hooves. More riders coming. Caleb looked up, jaw set, blood on his hands, the weight of everything closing in. The day had only gotten worse. Caleb sat by the fire, blood crusted up to his elbows, his back against the wall of the lean-to. Loretta lay on the cot, her breath thin and rasping, dressed dark with dried blood. He'd packed the wound, stitched what he could. She hadn't passed out, but she hadn't said much either. The sky outside had gone full black. Every hour since the shooting he'd expected hooves to come pounding down the trail. But no one came. Not yet. He kept the rifle close, but his eyes stayed on her. You awake? He asked. She didn't answer. He reached out, touched her wrist. Still warm, still pulsing. You shouldn't have run. He murmured. You could have been. She croaked. He croaked. He exhaled, relieved and raw. She shifted, winced. How bad? Grazed your ribs. Lucky. She opened one eye. Doesn't feel lucky. He gave a tired smile. Her voice was faint. Did you bury him? Silas. Caleb shook his head. Didn't have time. She tried to sit up but failed. He said something. About your wife. Caleb looked down. I need to hear it from you. She said. He didn't speak right away outside. The wind scraped hard against the siding. He finally said. Her name was Sarah. We were married 4 years. He leaned back, eyes on the fire. She was quiet, soft-spoken. One of those people who made everything seem slower when they walked in a room. Loretta listened, breath shallow. We fought. Like anyone. I was gone too much. Work and cattle up near Bent Rock. Long stretches. Came back once and found a bruise on her neck, small, like a thumbprint. Loretta's gaze sharpened. She said she'd fallen. Caleb went on, but her hands were shaking when she said it. Then she started locking the door at night. He stared into the flames. I didn't press, didn't want to see it. Loretta whispered, the sheriff. Caleb nodded slowly. He came by the house twice that month. Said he was checking on land permits. Never did that before. After she died, he told folks it was suicide. He rubbed his face with both hands. But I knew better. I knew. He swallowed. I just didn't want to say it out loud. Loretta was quiet a long moment. Then she reached out, took his hand. You think I'm running from something? She said, I know you are. She gripped his fingers tighter. So are you. They sat like that a while, not speaking, not needing to. Then she said, almost a whisper, I should have died out there. But you didn't. Her eyes glistened. Why didn't you ask me? Why I left him? Why I really left? I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. She stared at him. I left because I found something. Something I wasn't supposed to? What? She licked her lips. A letter. In Joe's clinic. Addressed to the judge. He leaned forward. It named Barnes. Said he was running a quiet line through town. Money. Military contracts. Unmarked crates. Joe was going to testify. Caleb's jaw tightened. She sent it Caleb. Loretta said. And I think it never made it. Because she never got to the courthouse. Loretta nodded. He found out. I think Silas was the one who told him. Caleb stood, began pacing. If that letter's gone. It's not. She said. It's in the bottom of Joe's ledger. Hidden behind the spine. I tucked it there the night I left. Caleb looked at her. We can use it. I think she meant us too. He paced again, then stopped. If we're going to move, we need help. The town. Someone still loyal to Joe, maybe the Reverend. Or Tom Garrett. She grimaced. And if they believe Barnes. Then we do it anyway. She looked at him, vulnerable for the first time in hours. What if they say I deserved it? That I brought it on myself. He crouched beside her. Then they're wrong. She stared at him, her voice trembling. I should have dug up that grave a long time ago. But I didn't want to know what was really buried there. He didn't ask which grave she meant. At first light, Caleb saddled both horses. Loretta was too weak to ride on her own, so he rigged a sling for her in front of him. Her body pressed to his chest, her head against his collarbone. They rode slow, east toward Santa Loma, avoiding the main road. As they crested the hill overlooking the church, Caleb spotted movement. A man pacing near the front steps, thin, nervous, clutching a Bible like a weapon, Reverend Cole. Caleb guided the horse down. The Reverend turned at the sound. Rourke. Caleb dismounted, cradling Loretta. She needs a place to rest. The Reverend blinked. She'll live. We don't have time. Cole opened the side door to the chapel. Caleb carried her inside, laid her on a pew. What happened? Cole asked, voice low. Barnes tried to kill her. The Reverend paled. She has proof, Caleb said. A letter Joe wrote. We need to get it. We need someone who still has her records. Cole rubbed his mouth. You think the judge will believe it? I don't care if he does, Caleb said. I care if the town sees it. Loretta stirred. They have to hear it. From me. The Reverend looked at her. Something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded. You can speak at Sunday sermon. Caleb blinked. You sure? She's earned it. Loretta tried to sit up, wincing. It'll be dangerous. Cole gave a thin smile. God's house ain't supposed to be safe, just sacred. They all knew what it meant, no more hiding, no more graves. That night, Caleb sat in the church with his rifle across his lap, watching over her, not to protect her like something fragile, but to guard what she carried. Truth, rage, and the fire they'd tried to kill. He didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time, it wasn't silence he feared. It was what the truth might sound like when it finally got a voice. Sunday came cold and bright, the kind of desert morning that cut sharp no matter how many layers you wore. The sky was clear, but tension hung low over Santa Loma like storm clouds just out of sight. The church bell rang once, then again. By the third toll, folks were already arriving. On horseback, in wagons, on foot. They came in twos and threes, quiet, expectant, their eyes darting, their mouths drawn tight. The pews filled faster than they had in months. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Caleb sat near the back, rifle propped against his leg, eyes never leaving the front of the room. Loretta sat beside him, wrapped in Joe's shawl. The wound at her ribs was still tender, but she stood straighter now, chin lifted. She hadn't touched her hair or washed the soot from her dress. She wanted them to see it. The truth of what she'd survived. Reverend Cole stepped up to the pulpit, hands gripping the edge of the wood like he needed it to stand. This morning, he said, voice steady, we'll break tradition. A murmur rolled through the room. Cole raised a hand. You all know Miss Loretta Kane. He continued, you've heard things, whispers, half-truths. This morning, she's going to speak for herself. He stepped back. Loretta rose slowly and walked to the front. She stood with her back to the pulpit, facing them all. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried. My name is Loretta Kane. I came to Santa Loma by train 6 weeks ago, wearing the dress you see now. I was told I'd be met by Sheriff Barnes, a man who sent for me under promise of marriage. A rustle passed through the room like wind through wheat. He saw me step off that train, then changed his mind. Said I looked too soft for the land. Gave me half a coach fare back and told me I was on my own. Her gaze swept the pews. I was abandoned. Alone, no room at the inn, no help from the station. So I walked. I walked through desert and wind and storm until I collapsed at the door of a man you all call the Gravedigger. Caleb didn't shift. He didn't need to. Every eye had turned toward him now. He didn't ask for anything. Loretta said, he gave me shelter, food, dignity, and when trouble followed, he stood between me and it. Barnes hadn't arrived, not yet, but Caleb could feel the pressure building. He could hear the boots outside, the tension in the floorboards. Loretta pulled something from inside her shawl, a folded letter. This is from Josephine Finn, she said. She wrote it days before she disappeared. Gasps. A name returned to life. She wrote to the judge, to the circuit court. She named Sheriff Barnes, said he was using his badge to traffic goods, illegal goods, through this town. She warned he'd silence anyone who got in the way. She held up the envelope. This is why she's gone. This is why they came after me. Someone stood in the front row, Mrs. Patterson. She crossed her arms. You expect us to believe you over the sheriff. I expect you to read the letter. Loretta replied. Another voice called out. Tom Garrett, big man, seated in the middle row. Miss Doyle's the one who helped my boy when he busted his arm out near the mill. Barnes never even came. Then another voice. She helped deliver my baby sister when Ma took sick. A wave began to rise. Not loud, not angry, but firm, until the doors slammed open. Sheriff Barnes entered, boots echoing down the center aisle. Behind him were 2 deputies and 3 men Caleb didn't recognize, hired guns, all armed. Barnes walked slow, steady, until he stood at the foot of the pulpit. Well, he said, loud enough for all to hear, looks like we got ourselves a revival. No one laughed. I came to reclaim what's mine, Barnes said, pointing at Loretta, and to arrest a known fugitive. She's no fugitive, Reverend Cole said, and you've got no warrant. Barnes looked at him. You want to be next, preacher? Caleb rose. The sound of his boots was quiet, but everyone felt it. He stepped forward, past the pews, until he stood between Loretta and Barnes. You're not taking her, he said. Barnes sneered. You going to stop me? Caleb didn't raise the rifle. He didn't need to. Then Loretta stepped forward, holding the letter. "This is a copy," she said. "The original's already gone to the circuit judge, by courier." That was a lie. Caleb knew it. So did she, but Barnes didn't, his face twisted. "You think that'll save you?" Loretta said nothing. Then a voice from the back. "Enough." "Mrs. Harmon," the storekeeper. She walked forward, past gasping townsfolk. "This girl's done more for this town in 6 weeks than you have in 6 years, Barnes. You're all being lied to." Barnes started, but Garrett stood. "So prove it." Barnes turned. The room was standing now, half the church, maybe more. The air was electric. One of Barnes's hired guns shifted uneasily. Then someone reached for a weapon. The moment broke. Caleb shoved Loretta down, raised his rifle. But the Reverend stepped between them all, voice like thunder. "This is God's house," he bellowed, "and you will not turn it into a killing floor." "Silence!" Barnes backed up one step, then another. He looked at Caleb, then at Loretta. "This isn't over." He growled, he turned, stormed out. His men followed, outside. Hooves beat fast into the dirt gone. For now. Inside, people exhaled. Loretta slumped against Caleb, shaking. He caught her. The Reverend stepped forward, voice low. "You did it." "No," Loretta whispered. "We just made it through Sunday." She handed the letter to Cole, then she turned to Caleb, her voice barely audible. "If I burn, I'll burn with the truth in my hand." He nodded, and behind them, the bell rang again. Louder this time, like something buried had just begun to rise. It began with silence, not the natural kind that came with early mornings in the desert, but the kind that followed behind you in town. The kind that filled the space where people used to say hello, where storekeepers used to ask how you were, but now only handed you change without lifting their eyes. Loretta felt it most when she stepped into the general store. Mrs. Harmon didn't speak. She didn't look up, just bagged the flour and the salt block, and pointed to the total written in pencil on a scrap of brown paper. Loretta reached for the small coin purse in her coat. Her hand trembled. Not from fear, not anymore, but from something harder to name. The crowd had cheered in church. They'd spoken out loud, some for the first time, but Monday morning, the quiet had returned like dust settling over truth. Outside the store, a group of women gathered around the pump well, their conversation lowering the moment she stepped into view. One of them turned away, another crossed her arms, staring like Loretta had tracked something dirty through their parlor. She walked past without a word. At the edge of the street, Caleb was waiting with the wagon, arms crossed, eyes scanning every window. He'd offered to come inside, but she'd refused. "You shouldn't be alone," he said as she climbed up. "I wasn't," she replied, staring back toward the store. They were all watching. They rode in silence back to the edge of town. Caleb didn't speak until the buildings faded behind them and the flatlands opened up again. "They're scared," he said. "Of what?" "Of what it means to pick a side." She looked at him. "I thought they already did." They spoke once. "Now they're waiting to see who survives." She nodded slowly. "And if I don't?" He didn't answer. At the cabin, the air felt heavier. The fire had been out since morning, and the wind had picked up from the north, snapping through the broken slats in the barn ruins. Caleb stepped down from the wagon first and paused. There, nailed to the side of the lean-to, was a piece of hide, fresh, still damp, a crude symbol carved into it with a blade, an X over a woman's face, below it a chicken feather, dyed black. Loretta froze when she saw it. "That's a mark," she said, "old cattle code. Stamped on stolen stock." "They're branding you," Caleb said. She pulled the hide down, hands shaking, and threw it into the fire pit, watching it curl and blacken. "Is this how it ends?" she asked. "Threats in daylight, silence in town." "No," Caleb said. "This is how it begins." They went inside. The crate from the well still sat buried beneath the floorboards. Caleb had added extra nails, sealed the seams with pitch. Loretta paced near the stove. "Barnes won't wait long. Not after Sunday. He's not the type. He'll push the judge." Caleb nodded. "Maybe already has towels." She turned to him, arms crossed. "Then we need to decide." "Decide what?" "If we leave. Or stay." He leaned against the doorframe. "If we run, we lose everything we stood for. And if we stay, we lose each other." His jaw tightened. She walked toward him slowly. "We could disappear. The land's big. The mail trail runs south. We follow the cattle lines, get lost in the movement. He didn't answer right away, thens. And the next girl, the next one Barnes pulls off a train. Loretta looked down. I know, she whispered. The next day brought more silence. The Reverend came by with a wrapped bundle, bread, preserves, a folded note. He didn't stay long, just nodded once and left. The note was from Mrs. Patterson. We see you, even when we don't speak. That night they heard the hammering. Caleb rose from the bed, rifle in hand, and opened the door. Down the trail, in the square near the church, men were building something, a platform, wood nails, ropes. He stepped out onto the porch. Loretta followed. A gallows? She asked. No, he said slowly. A stage. They watched as planks were laid, a podium raised. They're preparing a public hearing, he said. She frowned. You think it's for me? No, he said. It's for him. The town was calling the question. The next morning, the official notice arrived, tacked to the chapel door and posted at the general store. Public declaration of testimony and defense Wednesday at sundown. All citizens encouraged to attend. Loretta stared at the words like they might change if she blinked. He's going to try to flip it, she said. Make it about me. He won't, Caleb said. You have the letter. She shook her head. It's not enough. You have the people. Not all of them. She turned to him, her voice cracking. If I step on that stage, I lose everything. But if I don't, I lose you. He walked to her, gently touched her cheek. You're not alone anymore, he said. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the stove, staring at the flames, reading Joe's letter over and over, memorizing every word, every scrawl. When Caleb found her, she was whispering it aloud, like scripture. You don't have to be perfect, he said softly. You just have to be true. She looked up, eyes tired, voice hoarse. I can do that. And when the sun rose, painting the land in pale gold, they both knew there would be no more running, only what came next. The shovel struck something solid. Caleb stopped mid-swing, wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist, and leaned down. The morning sun was barely up, but his shirt was already soaked through. He cleared away the loose dirt with his hands. Wood. He tapped it with the handle, hollow, old. He glanced back toward the lean, to where Loretta still slept, then knelt and began working carefully, pulling dirt from around the edges. The box was buried behind the cabin, at the base of a long, forgotten cottonwood stump. He hadn't meant to find it. He'd just been digging the firebreak, widening it, trying to make sure that if Barnes, or someone worse, came back with torches, the fire wouldn't reach the cabin. But the earth had given him something else. By the time the lid was free, the sun had cleared the ridgeline. Caleb braced himself and lifted it. Inside, he found what he feared: a bundle of yellowed fabric and leather, a rope looped tight, a woman's shoe, still stained at the toe. He sat back on his heels, stomach tight. The smell was faint but unmistakable. Old death, hidden but not gone. Loretta's voice behind him was soft. You didn't bury her in the graveyard. He didn't turn. No, he said. She stepped beside him, one arm wrapped around her ribs. Why here? She didn't want a grave, he said. Didn't want a marker. Said the land already knew her. Loretta crouched beside him, looked down into the box. You carried her here. I dug it the night I found her. Sheriff told me to keep quiet. Said suicide would bring questions. Said it was better for everyone. But it wasn't suicide, she said. No. She picked up the shoe, turned it gently in her hand. She tried to run. She did. You didn't stop her. He looked at her finally, his voice low. I helped her pack. Loretta met his eyes. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I buried her twice. Once in the dirt, once in silence. They stood over the box a long moment. Then she reached down, pulled something from beneath the cloth, a small envelope, sealed in wax. The initials carved faintly into the corner, SR. She held it out to him. He took it slowly, stared at it. His name was written on the front in her handwriting, Caleb. He broke the seal. Inside was a letter, short, simple. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. But that's not your fault. You tried. You always tried. I left because I wanted to find a place where no man could claim me. Not even you. If they come after you, don't let them bury you too. Live. Not alone. Love again. Please. Caleb folded the letter, Hands shaking slightly, Loretta didn't speak. She didn't need to. He dropped the letter back into the box, then began refilling the hole, slow and steady. When it was done, they stood over the fresh dirt, the wind blowing soft across the pasture. Caleb said, "We speak tomorrow." For her, for Joe, for everyone Barnes tried to erase. Loretta nodded. "And if the town turns, then we keep digging." They walked back to the cabin in silence. That afternoon they chopped more wood, reinforced the door, and sealed the windows tight. Not out of fear, but preparation. The kind you make when you know something's coming, and you've chosen to face it. Just before sundown, a rider came fast down the trail. It was Tommy Bright, one of the ranch boys who used to run errands for Barnes. He reined in hard, eyes wide, dust thick on his coat. "Caleb," he called. "Loretta!" They stepped out onto the porch. Tommy pulled something from his saddlebag. A folded handbill. He handed it to Caleb. It was a warrant, State of New Mexico Territory. Wanted for obstruction, perjury, and sedition. Loretta Kane, stamped with the judge's seal, official. Loretta's jaw clenched. "He moved faster than we thought." Tommy shook his head. "That ain't all. Word is, he's coming tonight, not tomorrow, not at the hearing." "With who?" Caleb asked. "Half a dozen riders. Maybe more. Not deputies, just guns." Loretta's face went still. Caleb's grip tightened around the paper. Tommy leaned in. "You've still got friends. Just fewer than you did yesterday." He tipped his hat and rode off, disappearing into the dust. Inside, Loretta sat at the table, staring down at the letter from Caleb's wife. "This isn't about law anymore," she said. "No," Caleb replied. "It's about who stays standing." She looked up at him, eyes clear now, steady. "You ever think we were just two holes waiting to be filled?" He walked over, took her hand. "No," he said. "I think we were two graves that refused to stay closed." She nodded once, then stood. He pulled the rifle down from the wall, handed her the revolver. Outside, the sky was turning gold again. But this time, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like warning, and from far off, on the wind, came the first faint sound of hooves. "I'm not digging another grave for silence," Loretta said, and neither of them looked away. The first shot came just after midnight. It wasn't close, not yet. But it cracked through the canyon like a match to dry brush. Caleb was already awake, sitting at the table with the shotgun across his lap, boots planted, jaw tight. Loretta sat opposite him, eyes heavy but clear. Neither had slept. They both knew what was coming. Outside, the wind had stilled. No owls, no coyotes, just that thin, heavy silence before a storm breaks. Caleb stood slowly and moved to the window. The moon was high, clear, silver bright, lighting the land like glass. In the distance, the hills flickered with torchlight riders. At least 5, maybe more, moving slow, organized. "They're circling wide," Caleb said. Loretta moved beside him, lifting the rifle they'd oiled twice that day. "Trying to scare us first." He looked at her. "It working?" She gave a thin smile. "Not yet." Another shot cracked. Closer this time. Caleb ducked away from the glass, Loretta behind him. "They're testing range," he said. "We'll hold here." He hesitated, then "No, we split." She frowned. "We said we wouldn't run. We're not. We're baiting them." He crossed the room, pulled back a loose floorboard, and retrieved the oilskin pouch. Joe's letter, the backup copy, the last bit of proof they had. He pressed it into Loretta's hand. "You take this," he said. "Cut through the arroyo. Head for the chapel. Reverend Cole will be waiting, and you. I'll keep them here. Slow them down." She gripped his arm. "You won't hold long. I just need 10 minutes. She didn't move. He looked her in the eye. "If they want to find the truth, they'll have to chase it through fire." Her throat tightened. "You say that like you've already burned." "I have." She kissed him, fast and hard. "Then don't stay in the ashes." He helped her out the back window, handed her the revolver. "Go." She slipped into the shadows and was gone. Caleb turned back to the door. Breath steadying, he began piling the kindling at the threshold. When the knock came, it was gentle, almost polite. Then Barnes's voicey, evening, "Rourke, let's not make this ugly." Caleb struck the match. The fire took fast. Dry wood and kerosene primed it. Flames licked up the doorframe, catching the roofline. "You boys like graves," he shouted. "You'll get one." Gunfire erupted, wild and high. Bullets punched through the siding as the cabin blazed. Caleb dropped low, crawled to the back, and kicked the table over, shielding himself behind it. He counted 3 riders circling, 2 dismounted. He raised the shotgun, waited for footsteps. The first came through the smoke, face wrapped in cloth, torch in hand. Caleb fired once, the man dropped. The second froze, then ran. But Caleb's second barrel caught him in the leg. Screams echoed into the flame. From the front, Barnes's voice again. "Harder now. You think she can hide, Rook? I know every inch of this land." Caleb shouted back, "Then you know where you'll die." He ducked out through the rear crawlspace, into smoke and wind. His eyes stung. Heat seared his back. But the fire was spreading, fast and wild. Let it, he thought. Let it tell the story better than words ever could. Loretta ran harder than she ever had in her life. The arroyo was narrow, full of twisted roots and broken shale. Her side screamed where the wound had never fully closed. But she kept going. The stars overhead spun like slow fire when she reached the church. It stood quiet and dark. No guards, no watchers, only the wind. She banged on the back door. It creaked open. Reverend Cole appeared, lantern in hand. "My God," he said, seeing her face. "They're burning the cabin." She gasped. Caleb's still there. Cole stepped aside, pulled her in. "Hey, bought time," she said, handing him the letter. "Now we finish it." He nodded and went to light the front lamps. "No," Loretta said, stopping him. "We don't wait until morning. People won't come." "They will." She stepped into the aisle, raised her voice to the rafters. "They saw fire. They'll follow it." Cole stared at her, and then, slowly, they began to arrive, one by one, drawn by smoke, by whispers, by the need to know what had survived Mrs. Harmon, Tom Garrett. Even old Mr. Teague with his shotgun still slung over one shoulder. Within an hour, half the town filled the pews. Loretta stood at the front, hair loose, suit still on her face. She held up the letter. "This is her voice," she said. "Joe's. Mine. Yours. If you stay quiet now, you become part of what buried her." A long silence. Then Mrs. Harmon stood. "Let her speak." Outside, sirens began to wail. An old mining alarm Barnes had repurposed for town alerts. Loretta looked toward the windows. "He's coming." She turned back to the crowd, voice rising. "We don't run. Not this time." And every candle in the church was lit, each one burning higher, brighter, like a line had been crossed, and fire was now the only answer. Barnes rode into town with 5 men, and the smell of ash still on his coat. He didn't speak as they passed the burned remains of the cabin. The fire had gutted it clean. Nothing left but beams and smoke and a graveyard of embers. One of his riders, a kid barely out of his teens, muttered, "Nobody lived through that." Barnes didn't answer, because he didn't care if Caleb Rourke had lived. He cared if the girl had. The judge's letter had bought him legal cover, but not time. He could feel it slipping, like sand through glass. If the town saw her speak again, if that letter was read out loud, he wouldn't just lose control, he'd lose everything. The church bell rang once, a sound too steady, too proud. He kicked his horse hard. Inside the chapel, the pews were full. Reverend Cole stood at the altar, hands on the Bible but not speaking yet. Loretta stood beside him, the letter in her hands, and every candle in the place burned high and still. No one moved, no one whispered. They all knew what this was. Loretta's voice was steady. "He'll be here soon." Cole nodded. "Then let's make sure he doesn't leave with silence." She stepped forward, holding Joe's letter, ready to read. But the doors burst open with a bang loud enough to crack the air. Barnes walked in first. His men followed, guns drawn. The crowd didn't scatter. They didn't even flinch. Tom Garrett stood. "So you finally came out from behind the badge," he said. Barnes ignored him, eyes locked on Loretta. "You're under arrest for sedition and harboring stolen evidence." Loretta didn't move. "You're out of time, Sheriff. Don't test me," he growled. Then Caleb's voice echoed from the balcony above. "You've already been tested." Heads turned. Caleb stepped into the light, suit covering his shirt, one arm in a makeshift sling but very much alive. Barnes froze. "You're dead," he said. "Not yet." Caleb tossed something down. It landed with a clatter on the floorboards. The second copy of Joe's letter. Loretta caught it, hands sure. Reverend Cole stepped forward. We hold council now. Sheriff or not, you don't control this room. Barnes looked at his men. Arrest them all. But none of his riders moved. One lowered his gun. Another stepped back. He turned, eyes wild. You cowards. Loretta lifted the letter. You killed Joe. You covered it with papers and lies. But this town knows the truth now. He reached for his weapon. Caleb drew first. One shot. Barnes screamed. Hit in the shoulder. Spun to the floor. His gun skidded across the wood. Stopped at Mrs. Harmon's feet. She didn't touch it. Just stared down at him. Loretta walked forward. Voice calm, clear. You said no one would believe me. That no one would care. She turned to the crowd. Do you? A moment's pause. Then Garrett said, I do. Then the Reverend. Then the rest. Barnes groaned. Trying to rise, Caleb stepped beside him. This is your reckoning, Sheriff. And it doesn't come with a noose. It comes with the truth standing over you. Loretta looked down at Barnes, blood pooling beneath him. You taught me fear. But I learned that silence is more dangerous than pain. Outside, more horses arrived. Real deputies this time summoned by the emergency bell. They stepped inside, guns lowered as they took in the scene. One of them approached Loretta. You got the letter. She handed it over. He read it, jaw tightened. We'll take him, he said, nodding to Barnes. Two men hauled him to his feet. He cursed, spat, but his voice was thin now, powerless. The deputies let him out. No one followed. The church stayed full, candles burning. Loretta stood still, breathing hard, like something inside her had just cracked open. But not in a way that hurt. Caleb came down from the balcony, slow, arm pressed to his side. She met him at the bottom. You made it, she whispered. He managed a smile. So did you? They didn't kiss, didn't embrace. Just stood, side by side, eyes on the crowd. And the town, finally, was quiet, not with fear, but with understanding. A truth had been spoken, and it wasn't going back in the ground. The sky turned red the morning they left. Not the bloody kind of red that warns of storms or death, but a softer hue, like something burned down had finally cooled. The smoke from the cabin was gone now, carried east by the wind. All that remained was a blackened patch of earth behind the rise, and the faint scent of scorched pine. Caleb stood by the wagon, tightening the last strap. His left arm was bound close to his chest, shoulders still raw from where the bullet had grazed deep. But he moved without complaint. Loretta handed him the last bundle of supplies, wrapped in burlap, and still warm from Mrs. Harmon's kitchen. They hadn't asked for it. Folks just started showing up after dawn, quiet gestures, a sack of oats, a wool blanket, a sharpened knife wrapped in oilcloth. Nobody said much, no apologies. But maybe this was their way of saying, we saw you, we see you now. Loretta looked down the hill toward the chapel. It stood alone, same as ever, but with candles still flickering in the windows. Reverend Cole had offered them a room in town. Even the judge, red-faced and tight-lipped, had said she could stay pending the circuit court's decision. But neither of them wanted that. Too many eyes, too many versions of the truth. So they chose the road. I wired Silas, Caleb said, nodding toward the trail. He'll meet us at the Salt River crossing. Loretta raised an eyebrow. And we trust him now. I don't, he said, but I know what he owes me. They climbed into the wagon. The mule groaned, stubborn as ever. As they rolled past the last fence-post, a small voice called out, Miss Loretta! She turned. Maggie, Mrs. Patterson's youngest, ran down the hill barefoot, holding something in her hands. She reached the wagon, breathless, and held it up. A book. Tattered, but clean. I thought you'd want to keep reading, she said shyly. Loretta took it gently. Walt Whitman. She smiled. Thank you, sweetheart. Maggie nodded and ran back toward town. They rode in silence for a while, the trail winding out past old mines and the edge of the cottonwoods. The sun climbed slow. The land opened wider. Loretta flipped through the book, fingers brushing worn pages. Anything good? Caleb asked. She stopped on a page, ran her thumb under a line. Here. She said. She read aloud. I am larger. Better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. He glanced over. Is that true? She looked out over the plain. I didn't know I could hold so much anger. Or stand so long. They rode until the heat climbed, until the sweat gathered at their brows and soaked the bandage beneath Caleb's shirt. At midday, they stopped beneath a juniper, tied off the mule, and sat in the sparse shade. Loretta passed him a canteen and tore a piece of bread in half. "Still think we'll be followed?" she asked. "No." "Why?" "Because there's no story left to bury." She nodded. "Then, what happens when we run out of road?" Caleb looked at her, squinting against the sun. "Then we build one." She didn't laugh, didn't roll her eyes, just said, "You ever think we were both just looking for a place to hide?" He drank from the canteen, then handed it back. "I think we were both looking for a place to stop hiding." She leaned back against the wagon wheel, eyes half closed. For a long while, they listened to the wind and the creak of old leather. Then she said, "The story they tell about us won't be the truth. But the one we live still can be." He didn't answer. He just reached over, took her hand in his, held it, not tightly, just enough to say, "I'm still here." In the distance, a vulture turned wide circles in the sky. Beyond it, mountains waited, blue and jagged, a new horizon. And somewhere between the ashes and the edge of that range, a future neither of them could quite name, but they rode toward it anyway. They crossed the salt river at dusk. The sun bled gold across the water, turning the muddy current into something soft and shining. The mule hesitated at first, then stepped forward as Caleb clucked his tongue, the wheels slipping briefly in the shallows before finding purchase again. Loretta sat beside him, boots up on the rail, Joe's letter folded in her lap like a keepsake too fragile to lose. Neither had spoken much since the canyon pass, and the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was earned. On the other side of the river, they passed a ridge marked with scattered crosses, old graves, some with names, some without. Caleb tipped his hat as they rolled by. "I used to think graves were the only things you could build that stayed put," he said. Loretta looked at him. "You don't anymore." "No," he said. "Now I think people stay. If you let them." She smiled faintly. "Even the broken ones. Especially those." They camped that night under a cottonwood, the fire small but steady. Caleb brewed coffee in a blackened tin pot. Loretta sat with the book Maggie had given her, thumbing it open to where a pressed wildflower had been left between the pages. "Do you think we'll ever go back?" she asked. He shook his head. "There's nothing to go back to." She watched the flame dance. "Then where do we go?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Someplace quiet. Someplace where no one asks who you were before." "Do places like that exist?" "They do," he said. "But you have to build 'em yourself." Loretta reached for her journal, opened it beside her, and began to write. Not for anyone else, just to remember. She wrote about Joe, about the grave Caleb had dug behind the cabin, about the letter that changed everything. She wrote about Maggie, about Mrs. Harmon's quiet strength, about the look on Barnes's face when the badge stopped working. She didn't write about fire, or blood, or fear. She wrote about standing up when the fire burned low. Caleb settled back against the wheel. "You know," he said, voice rough, "when I first found you at the edge of that trail, I didn't see a woman who needed saving." "What did you see?" "I saw someone still deciding whether she wanted to live." Loretta didn't speak. Then she said, "I didn't. Not then. And now." She closed the book. "Eyes on the stars. Now I want to live in a world where the next girl doesn't have to crawl through the dirt to be believed." Caleb nodded slowly. "I'd follow you into that world." She looked over at him, smile tugging at her mouth. "You already did." The night deepened. Crickets began their slow rhythm. Coyotes howled far off, but it wasn't a threat. Just a sound that belonged. Loretta lay back on the blanket, stared up at the endless sky. She thought about all the names she'd worn, all the miles she'd traveled, all the times she'd been told she was too much, or not enough, or someone else's problem to solve. None of that followed her here, none of it ever would again. At some point, Caleb reached over and took her hand, not with urgency, just with certainty. In the dark, she whispered, "We weren't saved. We survived, that's the difference." And he replied, "Now we get to decide what that means." They didn't need vows, didn't need a preacher or a church or a town's approval. They had the firelight, the silence, the scarred ground behind them, and the long road ahead. They fell asleep side by side, with the stars wheeling above and the river running soft below. And somewhere past the ridgeline, past the hills and the silence and the shame, a new life waited, not perfect, not pure, but free,